Hi, and welcome to the Passionistas Project podcast. We're Amy and Nancy Harrington. If you enjoy listening to the show, please consider becoming a patron. Just a small donation of $1 a month can help us keep the project going, and you'll get rewards like buttons, access to premium content, and invites to Passionistas Project events. Today we're talking to Annette Corsino-Blair, the owner of the Knitting Tree LA and the Branch Gallery. Annette is known not only for the great selection of yarns in her store, but for fostering a growing community of knitting enthusiasts. So please welcome to the show, Annette Corsino-Blair.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
What are you most passionate about?
I'm passionate about color and texture and the feelings that the color and texture evoke, and then creating something beautiful with those. Whatever the medium, it just so happens I have the yarn store, so I use fiber. But I'm also a painter and a photographer, so I would say I'm passionate about that, and I'm also passionate about teaching people and bringing people together, and then sharing this particular art form or craft with as many people as I possibly can.
Talk a little bit about how that relates to what you do here.
We sell the raw materials, we sell the yarn, and we also dye the yarn here, so we create colors we want if we can't find them. Knitting, crochet, weaving, those kinds of activities have been done traditionally for years by women together in groups. So as you can see, we have this big table here, and pretty much every day we have people sitting around the table and knitting or crocheting. My job is to educate them to be the best knitters, crocheters, weavers they could be, and then to foster the community that brings. At any one time around this table, you could find every race, every socioeconomic background. It's crazy. I love it. It's like a little microcosm of Los Angeles. Like, I look around the table and not only people of all different races and things like that, but also there's such a tremendous wealth of knowledge with all these women. There's lawyers and doctors and moms, and we have one pathologist that comes in. She's always showing us her severed limbs and stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's really wonderful. And I love the fact that people who normally wouldn't sit together at a table can do that here. It's super chill. I love it. Every culture around the world has its form of the fiber arts. You see women up in the mountains herding goats and spinning the mohair. And there's also different types of knitting that happens all over the world. Like the Portuguese do it slightly different than the English, who hold their knitting needles very properly, like a pencil, up near their faces. And the Portuguese are like jamming it out with their thumbs. It's really interesting to see all the people coming in here from around the world and sharing what it's like in their country. We had some women from Sweden the other day, from Australia. Being so close to the airport, we get people from all over the world, and it's so fun.
And yet, what's the common thread that you think ties them all together?
Love of fiber, love of the craft, and love of knitting it together. If you go anywhere in the world, you can go into a yarn shop and make a friend, because that's the way it is. It's like this common thing that you have with each other. Oh, you're a fiber lover. Well, you must be cool. And let's talk, let's be friends, let's share our projects. It's an instant icebreaker. I even went to Burning Man with my daughters, like in 2008. And there it is, it's like 98 degrees out there. And there were people with their spinning wheels, spinning yarn. And Ravelry, I don't know if you're familiar with Ravelry. Ravelry is like Facebook, but for knitters. And that had just come into being. So people were, for the first time, able to communicate around the world and say, I'm going to Burning Man, bring your knitting. And we met up in the Burning Man Center. They have this little temporary town center, and we were sharing spinning and knitting in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. People from, I think there was New Zealand, Australia, London. It was crazy. But that's the kind of thing that happens when you knit and crochet. It's amazing, and it's really funny because most men are not aware of it. I was talking to this one businessman. I went to a business conference, and he was very condescending. And he was like, why are you here? And I said, oh, I have a yarn store. And he says, oh, have you ever considered going to teach in senior citizens' homes? You know, like that. And I said, are you kidding? I said, this is a bigger industry than golf. And he goes, well, why don't I know about this? I go, because none of us tell our husbands, because they would say, why are you wasting money on yarn? So we hide it in our trunks and stuff like that. But it's so true, completely unaware. It's a giant subculture that not a lot of people know about. It's like a secret club.
Do you ever have any men come in?
Oh, yeah. We have guys come in. They shop much differently, though. That's the funny thing. Guys come in and they do like a direct strike. They go, this is what I need. They get it, they leave. Few of them will sit and knit with us, but most of them are just kind of like always looking over their shoulder. But it's great. I love to see guys come in. In fact, one of my employees is a man, and he's a designer, and he has his own line of yarn called Left Coast Dye Works, and he's amazing.
Tell us a little bit about the path you've taken to get here.
I had been raising my children, and I was always teaching art. I had a little studio that I would teach kids, I would teach adults, drawing, painting, whatever, and I've been a maker my entire life. Arts and crafts and those kinds of things really saved me as a kid because I was the youngest of a large family. My parents were retired. I didn't get to do a lot of things. So I didn't go away to a lot of camps. I didn't have a lot of classes. So I would go to this local school that had day camp, free day camp for the local kids. I grew up in a housing project. And I would go there and make things, and it just was the highlight of my life, I would guess. You know, we made the little mosaic ashtrays and the lanyard, and we did crazy hats, and that was what I loved to do. And my mom and my sisters, they would make things for department stores. So my mom was always doing some kind of beading or sewing. They would make drapes for the local department store. Making was always a big part of my life. My father was a painter, but we had a little tiny apartment, so he would paint in the kitchen. It wasn't even an eating kitchen, it was this tiny little thing. And we'd be jumping on him while he was trying to paint. It was kind of crazy. He worked in a factory full time, but would paint, that was his love. So I've always been making things my whole life. And then I went back to art school when my kids were little. I was 35 and really started painting seriously and showing my work and things like that. But it never really brought me that soul massaging thing. You know, my mother, she taught me how to knit, sew, do all the different crafts because she just thought we should know how to do it. And it kind of fell out of fashion with my generation. So a lot of people did not grow up learning it. And then when you are on the right track, just things lay out for you. I happened to go to this garage sale where there was this woman was getting rid of all of her knitting stuff, and I just like grabbed a big thing of knitting needles, and I went into my local store, my local yarn store, which I eventually wound up buying, and I said, you need to order chunky yarn, it's fashionable now. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, give me all your, your cards. And I picked out the yarn. I'm like, this one. It was a very thick yarn from Spain. He goes, okay, I'll order it. And sure enough, he started selling it like crazy. And so then I started knitting, and everywhere I went, people were asking me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm knitting. Here, let me teach you. And I had all those extra knitting needles from the garage sale, so I was just teaching people. And then eventually I started a knitting group in my kitchen. And after a while, there were so many people in the kitchen on Monday nights. And then a neighbor moved in who had been a knitter since she was 4. And I said, let's open a store. Obviously, we need one. And we were open in 3 months. I put it all on a credit card. So that store was open for 5 years. Unfortunately, my partners, one of them moved to Oregon, and one of them just wanted out after like 18 months. And I was really dumb and didn't know a lot about business. They were like, can we have the money we put in? And so I paid them back, which was really dumb. I should have just closed the door, but those are the kind of things you learn. So I wound up in debt, and we closed during the recession. But I kept it going. I still kept a knitting group in my house. And through a divorce, through a bad relationship, through losing my store, the fiber art still kept me going. And I still had my friends. And people were still friends from the store. And then in 2013, people started calling me. That store I told you about, it was going up for sale. And it was really in bad shape. The guy was not doing well. And so he just kind of wanted to get rid of it. So we bought it. My now husband bought it and completely gutted it and made this. And he was like, why would you want to open up a yarn store? This place is a disaster. So I took him to really nice boutiques. And he goes, oh, now I get it. And he's been in hospitality his whole life. So he was perfect. I said, most women, they just want to be heard. We live in a man's world all day. You come in here, you're on our turf. And this needs to be a place to be heard, to relax, and to just say, how are you doing today? It's like you have nothing to prove today. Just sit, relax, and create. And that's what I love to do, is inspire that creativity in people. To say, yes, you can do that. And people get so excited. Look what I made. Look what I made. I made a thing. Yeah, it's fun.
Tell us also about the gallery.
We were looking for a second space because we were opening our online store. And the place we were in Culver City, it's one of those old 70s or maybe 60s outdoor mini mall. And with the popularity of Culver City, I knew that it wasn't going to last very much longer, and it's not. So I said, well, look for a retail space as well, so we can move over there if something goes wrong. And so my husband was looking, and we got this cool space, the one next door at the gallery, before we had this store. And it was just so beautiful. We said, this looks like a gallery. And we said, well, let's open up a gallery just for fiber arts. This is related to the store. And we kind of went at it backwards. And eventually what we want to do with this space, and we're getting very close to that, is just teach classes and exhibit what our students make. Because fiber arts have always been like, they've been the art world's unwanted cousin or whatever you call it. And we're trying to elevate the fiber arts because there's so much skill involved. It's just because it's been a traditionally women's craft, I guess. It's not looked upon as something of value. And it's interesting because I've started seeing fiber arts on gallery walls now, like really crude stuff, and people are like, oh, that's amazing. You should come and see what we have.
Talk a little bit more about the community that you foster here.
It's a safe place, and it's very interesting because I talk to a lot of African American women who are in this industry incredibly underserved. We're in a predominantly African American community, although it's changing and gentrifying, which kind of makes me a little sad. But I hear the way they talk to each other, and they always come in very hesitantly. I talked to one lady, and she said, whenever we go into a store or a yarn store like this, we're either shown the sale bin, or we're ignored, or we're followed around. And I'm like, really, in this day and age? Well, of course, now in this day and age. So I'm like, heck, I'm coming into this community. This is one of the wealthiest areas in the country as far as African American communities. Why not? I don't care. I grew up in a housing project. There was every race you could think of. And I laugh with my husband and I say, I've kind of recreated my neighborhood here. It's so true. And they'll talk to each other, and someone comes in very hesitantly and they go, don't worry, this is a safe place. And I was like, wow, I was blown away by that, because that's an experience I've never had. I'm half Mexican, but I look very white, and my relatives have had a different experience in life than I have because things have been a lot easier for me. Same here. But I've come to really, really appreciate and respect these women and men, not just the African American, but the Mexican Americans and the Asian. And, I've really come to get to know the cultures because that's what we sit around and we share when we're sitting here. I watch the struggles some of the African American women have when they're looking for a job. Stuff I've never had. I've always been able to go in and get an interview, and they're completely dismissed. And so I've grown to have an appreciation for all women, elderly women who are completely dismissed. I've experienced it. You become invisible after a certain age. I hear it all the time, and I make it a practice to tell the people who come in here, you're beautiful. Look at what you're making. You're an awesome person. And I'm always laughing, and I go, well, they say, this is so hard. I'm going, no. Did you go to college? Did you raise children? Because that's the hard stuff in life. This is just sticks and string. You can totally deal with this. This place here is for us to gather and to support each other. And that we do. We've helped people deal with deaths in their family, or parents who are aging and they're just about ready to lose their minds, or having grandchildren or graduations, and we all are aware of what's going on in each other's lives. And I think in LA especially, it's really important because people are so disconnected. But how many people walk in here and they go, this is my happy place. It's my happy place.
How have you tapped into the business entrepreneurial side of your personality?
Oh, that's been interesting. I always try and build a better mousetrap. I have always had an insatiable need to know how to do things. I worked for an architect for 4 years and the accountant got ill, like really seriously ill. I said, well, I did a little QuickBooks in my business. I can do this. So I learned how to do bookkeeping and I was his bookkeeper for 4 years. I don't know. I just have that kind of mentality. If I want to do something, I do it. I think it's probably more will than anything else. Like, I just want to do that, so I'm going to do it. And if I don't do it, it sniggles at me. Like any creative person, I believe that creative energy, if not used, will turn back on you. And it winds up as depression. It winds up as anger and unhappiness in general. I know that when I get a bug to do something, I better do it. I don't know. It's just the entrepreneurial spirit. That's one of those things. Like, I want to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out the best way to do it. And I kind of don't let things stand in my way. I should probably be smarter about it a lot of times because I can be impulsive, but I think I've created something pretty wonderful. I get down on myself sometimes because I don't know, and I feel like I don't know enough about business, but I'm always trying to educate myself. I take seminars, I read about other women who've been successful, and a lot of them say the same thing that I do. They started it for a passionate reason and then kind of had to educate themselves in the other part of it.
We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and you're listening to the Passionistas Project Podcast and our interview with Annette Corsino-Blair. Visit theknittingtreela.com to find out more about her store, gallery, and growing fiber community of knitting enthusiasts. Now here's more of our conversation with Annette. Describe a typical day.
I'll come in here to the shop about 10:30. Actually, sometimes I dye yarn before work. Before work, the shop opens. I'll dye yarn or knit or do some kind of designing or sewing in the hours before I come in because I live in Pasadena. It's about an hour commute here, about an hour and a half back. Then I'll come into the shop, we get things set up. We have classes. People will come in. It's really funny. There's people who've taken my beginning class like 5 or 6 times because they just like the people they're in class with. It's answering questions, helping people put projects together, maybe holding someone's hand who's having a hard time, just visiting with people, sitting, helping them to pick things out, to put color together. Like for me, color's no issue, but for a lot of people, they're afraid to put 2 colors together. I don't know why, but I'll help them do that. Ordering special yarn they need. We go on to Ravelry. I have a computer up there and we'll help them pick out a project. Those are the days when I'm in the shop, and then we have our social knitting. There's always people hanging around the table knitting together. Like I said, last night we have our weekly pick up your sticks night is what we call it, and we bring greens and people bring side dishes, and we have some really good stuff and salad toppings. And we kind of break bread together. It's another way to bond as a community. And then on Sunday we do a brunch. And that's really fun. Gets a little crazy. The ladies on Sunday are really wild. And then over the summer, we have something called Tree Scouts on Sunday afternoon, which is really fun. That's part of not wanting to grow up a little bit, I think. And I love the Girl Scouts so much. I mostly just like the uniform. And so we have skill building over the summer. So you have to crochet a beret and knit a sash. And we get little patches for every new skill that you learn. We do things like macrame and weaving, crocheted necklaces, tatting, needlepoint, yarn dyeing. So every week we have just this little class of skill building. It's like $10 a class, and everybody's like really into it. I thought it would just be super silly, but they wear the berets. We have a little pledge. We do our cross knitting needles. So fun. But it's part of that, like when I used to go to camp and just do something and take away something that you've done and think about nothing else. All of these arts are like forced meditation, and you have to be completely present and think about nothing but what you're doing. And it's funny because I used to volunteer at a domestic violence shelter, and the women would be doing great knitting, And then we'd start talking about their relationships, and then automatically they'd be dropping stitches or just getting really upset. And I said, okay, no talking about anything, no talking, period. We're just gonna like work on our work. And it was really healing for them. I actually spent some time there in that very hard time in my life when I was in a bad relationship. And when I went into the shelter, I knit like 2 sweaters and a couple of hats. And I said, when I get out of here, I'm going to come back and teach, which I did 2 years later. And it was very, very healing for me and very healing for a lot of the women.
What's your secret to a rewarding life?
Keep it simple. Spend a good portion of your day in your zone, whatever brings you to the zone. Don't waste time worrying and fretting. And I'm not saying I don't. That's a reminder to myself as well as to everyone else. You plant your seeds. Plant your seeds with your intentions. And who do you want to be in this world? You have to decide who you're going to be and really embody that. Because you have the control. You always have choices, even in the midst of seemingly horrible situations. And even those situations that I've been in, I always know something better is coming. Because those times of hardship lead to insight, they lead you to grow. I mean, they're uncomfortable when you're in them, but I look at them as like, oh, something great's going to happen now because this really sucks. And just remember your family, keep your heart open, try not to be mad at people. I'm also half Italian, and I spent a lot of time being mad at people when I was younger. So be kind and open and loving to everybody that you meet, and try and find something good about in everyone you meet, because sometimes, people come in here and they're pretty crabby, and then you just sit and you're like, how's your day? Is everything okay? And then they'll, I've had women just start crying. Oh, I'm having a hard time. I was just in an accident or whatever, and just be a space to listen.
Is there one lesson you've learned through your work that sort of sticks with you in your life?
Everyone has value. You have value. I have value. That was a tough one for me, especially coming out of a controlling relationship, and I was at the bottom. I was like sitting on the floor in the bathroom going, I can't go on. I can't do this. This is too hard. And then I said, I'm not going to let this jerk take a mother away from my children. I was like, I'm worth more than that. And I just like got up. I called all my friends. I called my daughter and I said, can you help me move in the next 3 hours? And then I went into the shelter and stuff. But through that, the arts have helped to heal me. So the lesson that I've learned is when you create, you heal. When you give that creativity, you help others heal. You teach people to unleash their creativity in their own lives, and they can do great things. And we've all helped each other here do great things in our life, even if it's just being kind to one another.
What's been your biggest professional challenge, and how did you overcome it?
Getting over the terror of running a business every day. It's very challenging. We have, 5 employees, and we've had times where money's been really tight. It's summertime. Business is slow now. Again, just having the faith that the answers will come. There have been times where I've run out of yarn and I just dyed a bunch myself. The thing that I realized, and this is a shift that I had with the professional life, is if you don't like the way things are, change them. These numbers aren't working, so let's change those numbers. It's also forced me to have more ingenuity, like necessity being the mother of invention, figuring out other ways of looking at things, of coming up with solutions that I wouldn't have thought of had things been easy. So again, having faith that I'm going to get the answer, that I'm going to find the answer. I don't just sit there and wait, but I'm going to go after it, look for a solution. And also thinking I was smart enough to run a business, because when I got married, I was like, oh, you take over this part of it. And it's like, no, I have to look at my own numbers. I have to do this myself, especially because he's now got a full-time job. And just having the faith in myself to say, yeah, I'm a pretty smart person. I can do this. Or I can learn about it. We've got YouTube, for God's sakes.
Is there something you know now that you wish you had known when you started the business?
Don't be so heart-centered when it comes to the actual numbers. And, I was like, oh, I love this stuff. Let's order it, blah, 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 blah. And I wound up getting myself into a bad situation because I ordered too much. So I would say to really be disciplined about looking at the numbers, because it is a numbers game. Your activities create your numbers. If you don't like the numbers, change your activity. You got to keep a level head about that. And I tend to be more emotional about things. So I'm trying to change that. I think I have in a lot of ways. I still have a long way to go, but.
You talked a little bit about your mom. What lessons did she teach you about women's roles in society?
She was brave. You want to talk about bravery. My mom was a Mexican-American woman in 1946. She was married at 15. She got pregnant. That happened to a lot of Latinas, I will say, Hispanic women. And so she had one baby. She had another miscarriage. She was pregnant with her third. And she goes to this nightclub where her husband, who was a little bit older, was. And she saw that he was cheating again, right? She said, I've had it. She goes home. She puts a bag of sandwiches together. I think she had maybe $20. She got on a train and left him and never saw him again. And she went across the country on a train to where her sister was. Her sister had joined the Navy. She was a wave during the Second World War. And so she was in Connecticut with her husband. My mom went there and lived with her, went to hairdressing school, never even finished high school. The best way to describe her, I'll tell you this one story. My father was a bit of a macho Italian, but she checked him. So there was 2 girls, and my brother was in the middle, and 2 more girls. My 2 older sisters from my mom's first marriage, and then my brother, and then us. And my mom said to my brother, go wash the dishes. And my father said, no son of mine is going to be washing the dishes. So she went and she piled up all the dishes. She brought them in front of my dad, and she dropped them on the floor and broke every dish. And she said, there, now no one will wash the dishes. And that's how she was. You stand up for yourself. You don't take no for an answer. You especially as a woman, you've got all the power. Use it. My father worshiped her. That's what I thought relationships were. I was sadly mistaken. But here was a woman who didn't finish high school, who wound up helping to provide for her family and never stopped giving to other people, ever. She still does it. She's 80, she'll be 88 next month. And she still volunteers in senior citizen homes, and she goes to church every day. She's got her list of the people they pray for, and that's her purpose. Her purpose is helping people as much as she can. So I have a little of that in me. I always thought she should have been a nun or something. But she's wild too. That's the thing. She was always really wild and crazy and had a great sense of humor. So I learned self-determination. I learned that you can always make money, make something and sell it. You always have the ability to support yourself. Even if it's cleaning toilets or whatever, you just do it. You do what you have to do to get by. You do what you have to do to take care of your family.
What about any other cultural heroines that you have?
Frida Kahlo, she's a badass. And I know it's kind of cliche anymore, but she was one of the first women, especially in the art world, to really get recognized. And it really wasn't until after her death she was recognized even more. But she was a woman who did her own thing. She wanted to be a communist. She was a communist. She didn't care what people thought. She was hanging out with all these intellectuals. And I love that she had a separate house from her husband. They had 2 houses that were joined by a bridge. She was great. And I read a lot about her history. She was one of the first women artists that really, really inspired me. And I love her work, but I love who she was even more. And the way that her imagery, I can really relate to. I used a lot of similar kind of imagery in my painting. There are certain iconic images in Mexican culture that are used a lot over and over again. And when I saw her work, I was like, wow. I feel a real kindred with any of the female archetypes like Mary Magdalene and Isis and all of the great ones. Like Native Americans have this goddess. She's Spider Woman weaving, they call her. And she weaves her prayers into the earth. In every stitch, there's prayers woven in. And I kind of feel like that sometimes. When you're making something for something else, you're putting into your work all those things you want for that person.
What's your proudest career achievement?
Opening the store. I've had a few art shows that I've been pretty proud of too. Creating a cohesive body of work. I always tell my children, and it is the truth, my best job ever has been being a mother. By far. The most satisfaction, the most enriching in my life has been raising my children. And they have given my life the most meaning. Aside from them, my store and the community that I've created here. And even the gallery. God knows what that'll become, but I love seeing people come in here and be happy. And, our Christmas party has like 75 people. It's crazy. And just everybody's so happy, and they always say, thank you for creating this space, Annette. You don't know what you've done. Sometimes you get hung up in the everyday, like, oh my God, how am I going to keep my doors open? And then someone comes in and says that, and it's always a message to me to keep going.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to be an entrepreneur?
Know as much as you can about your subject matter. Take business classes. Learn about money. I think as women, we're really skilled at a lot of things, but we don't study the numbers as much as we should. And that's really, really, really important. Keep up with social media. Now you have to have the whole package. Like, I have the brick and mortar store. I also have an online store. But we also have to be posting on social media. We have to be doing our homework to see what's trending. If you can't devote your whole life to it, don't do it. Make sure that you love it. This is something that for most of the time is not even work for me because I love it, but be prepared to spend a lot of hours. If someone calls in sick, you're going to be working. Some days you're working 7 days a week. That's just it. Take responsibility for everything. Know as much as you can and prepare when things aren't going so great. Always have an exit strategy.
What's your definition of success?
Success is making a contribution while not sacrificing yourself. I don't know, I just feel it in my heart when you say that. It's a contentment, but not like a lazy contentment. Like, I'm doing something good in the world. I'm able to support myself and maybe give to my family and my friends and my community. To have a group of friends that you can support and they can support you. To have fun every day. To be able to be healthy. That's really important to me. I think when you move your body, everything else moves too. The energy around you. Success is being able to do the things you love every day and not have anything really getting in your way about that. It's creating a life where you could do that. Creating a life where you can stay in the zone for as long as you can.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with Annette Corsino-Blair. Visit theknittingtreela.com to find out more about her store, gallery, and growing fiber community of knitting enthusiasts. And be sure to subscribe to our Passionistas Project podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring guests.